Hello, welcome to today's live. Feel still not like 100%, but I'm here and I'm excited for this one because I have a bit of a topic today. And I wanted to talk a little bit about menopause because it is something that many of my clients go through, and because it is annoyingly both probably the most important time of your life to exercise and look after yourself, and at the same time, one of the hardest times of your life. Also, I'd like to draw attention to the fact that my hands are a different color because I've just been outside and it's freezing. And because of Reynolds, they'll probably take. I'd be surprised if by this live they were back to normal color. But anyway, if you have any questions at all, I will try and get through them all. I am going to focus on the ones that I collected in the question post around menopause. And I'm just going to start from the start or the bottom of the list and try and whiz through as many as possible. I meant to do a podcast with Mike and Dan today, which is why I've got my Fitness Unfiltered t-shirt on. But Dr. Mike has blown a tire, so we're unsure as of yet. Has there been a WhatsApp update? No, we're unsure whether it will go ahead, but hopefully it will. Okay, so I am 47, no periods due to IUD, hot flushes, and bad sleep, safe to presume I'm menopausal. Potentially, yes. And I mean, it sounds a lot like yes, especially with the hot flushes. However, I would still go and speak to a doctor. And again, like it's very hard to assess whether someone is menopausal because there isn't a specific test. You can test hormone levels, but because hormone levels fluctuate, sometimes you might be like, oh, you doesn't seem like hormonally you are menopausal. And then other times, if you were tested at that time, it may seem like you are. So that's why the diagnosis is usually in retrospect is like a year of having no periods. Oh, look, now you are postmenopausal. You can normally tell when someone is perimenopausal more based on their symptoms. So it sounds like you probably are, which means I would go and speak to a doctor about what will be the best treatment course for you. Okay. Zooming down to the right, okay. I think this is meant to say carb, but pretty sure it is. I heard that we menopausal women should carb cycle. Is that right? No. And actually, any diet that is like specifically made for menopausal women would be a big red flag. Like, there isn't necessarily anything that you need to do differently. However, like, and this is the biggest thing from like a coaching perspective, it may be significantly harder for you because of the symptoms. But that doesn't mean that you need to carb cycle. It doesn't mean you need to go keto. It doesn't mean you need to fast. Like, you lose fat in exactly the same ways. Via a calorie deficit. It just might be, probably, depending on the symptoms that you have, harder to create that deficit. Another question about carb cycling: is this the best diet for perimenopausal women? No. I'm 43. Is there anything I can do now to make menopause easier when it comes? Yes, there is. And it's probably, I'm assuming, if you're following me, potentially everything that you're already doing. So things like resistance training, eating enough protein, getting in a variety of fruit and veg. Basically, if you think about it, anything for your health, like everything you would normally do for your health, that is what you can do to make menopause easier for you and to kind of set yourself up in the best shape possible for menopause. I mean, the biggest thing, or at least one of the biggest things, would be resistance training, because post menopause, it'll be slightly harder to build muscle, and most people tend to have a decline in muscle as they age. A large part of that is due to inactivity as opposed to inevitability, i.e., as people age generally, and this is observational data, like it has been observed that as people age, their muscle mass tends to reduce. Much of that reduction is actually because people don't continue resistance training as they age. Some of it is also due to the hormonal profile, and that's true in both men and women. So there's this anabolic resistance that occurs, so that all of the anabolic signals that build muscle would become slightly dampened, so you wouldn't get the same response from that. And that means that things like resistance training and building muscle, sorry, resistance training and eating protein, which are the two things that stimulate muscle protein synthesis that would build muscle, are even more important. Some people hear this and almost take the opposite approach of like, right, so you're saying as I age, I'll probably lose muscle anyway, so there's no point building muscle. I'm like, no, no, no. I'm saying the exact opposite. As you age, you are more likely to lose muscle. Thus, it is more important to do everything you can to avoid losing muscle. And I think that we underestimate the massive impact that muscle plays on health. Hi, Kelly. I assume you're in your garage on your treadmill. Katie, question. If you have a question, fire it away. Exercise regularly, weights and cardio, but have achy joints, especially knees. Any advice, please? Definitely see a physio. I've heard people say before, if you get bad DOMS, you have overworked. It was just a functional circuit and I'm so sore. Is there anything to take that would ease this and be beneficial? The thought that having DOMS means you've overworked is completely wrong. It means that you've probably done some exercises that you haven't done for a long period of time, or in a rep range that you haven't done for a long period of time, or that you have done a lot of eccentric loading exercises. So things that are creating tension on the muscle as the muscle lengthens, that can all cause like more severe DOMS. Also, Katie Kane, I do miss you. I can see that you have just messaged me there. All your steps are done. Well done, Kelly. Oh, right. The second part of that question about DOMS, is there anything you can do? Honestly, not a huge amount. Time will definitely help. Keeping active will definitely help. Getting in enough protein will definitely help. Those are kind of your core things. And also note that, let's say, I can't remember what you said you did, a functional circuit. Trust me, the next time you do that functional circuit, you will be far less sore. Middle age spread, is it a thing? Yes, there is. Taking G Dom. Taking G. Oh, talking of DOMs. Yeah, fire away. Yes, middle age spread is a thing. When your estrogen levels drop during menopause, the body fat distribution that you have changes. So, as women, and this is predominantly due to levels of estrogen, we tend to store our fat around our bum, around our thighs, around our like, bingo wings, right? Quite peripheral. Look at my finger. Wow. Anyway, quite peripherally, which means, which is actually a really safe way to store body fat, right? Actually, one of the problems of storing too much body fat is that it starts to accumulate viscerally around your organs, and that's when you get metabolic complications. Now, if you're storing it more peripherally, like on your thighs, on your bum, on your arms, there's actually far less metabolic complications to that. Now, when you hit menopause and your estrogen levels drop, your distribution of body fat will change. That might not mean that your body fat levels have changed if, say, your diet and exercise don't change, but your distribution of it will. So it can feel like you are putting on body fat, you're just getting body fat in areas that you weren't used to experiencing it. So, yes, it absolutely is a thing, and is one of the reasons that post-menopause women are at high risk of things like type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease. And again, why it's so, so important to look after your health. Um, oh, Mike has just sent a voice note. That's not helpful. I feel like I probably shouldn't listen to it on the live. Okay, I'm 46 on the implant, so get no periods. Feel great and exercising lots, but waking up roasting during the night and sleep isn't great. Is it likely menopause starting? It could be. I mean, the reason I'm saying it could be is that at this time of year, with it being quite cold, I wonder why you're waking up so hot at night. Um, yeah, unless like, you're doing something like you got yourself a heated blanket or you're eating lots of meat or something before bed. I don't know. I would keep an eye on it and other symptoms. But it's great. I mean, if you're feeling great, that's great. 51, arthritis, injured spine, and overweight. So worried about starting to exercise because of all that. Limited movement due to pain in spine and joints. Where do I start? Okay, start small. and do it very slowly. And the other thing I would do, especially with anything like arthritis, IBS, like any kind of chronic pain or chronic fatigue or like ongoing, I don't know what the right, I was going to say issue, but that makes it sound like ongoing condition, right? Make sure you are keeping a diary of how you feel, how your like pain is in relation to your spine, how your arthritis is. Things like swimming might be really good for you because it's not weight bearing. And give yourself some credit for just doing anything. Like get into the pool, even do like you can do some aqua aerobics, you can do a bit of swimming, do whatever, but do something and then ease yourself in. Like, don't try and start with full workouts. Don't worry about what anyone else is doing. If you can just get into the gym, get on a cross trainer, again, there's not as much impact as something like running, which will be quite a lot on your joints, especially if you're overweight at the moment as well. So, getting on the cross trainer or doing the bike or something, just start. Like, don't worry about how much you're doing. Like, let's focus on doing like 10 minutes. 10 minutes on the cross trainer this week. Let me know how you get on. Um, Still leg dumbbell deadlifts or stiff leg dumbbell deadlifts. Yeah, that will give you DOMS, babe. That's literally the number one DOMS. I have Raynaud's as well. I mean, it's getting back. That's almost there. We're almost back. How annoying is it? It's actually obscenely annoying, and you just can't feel it. And the thing is, I've literally had this finger on my hot water bottle, which I told myself I would stop using because it started to like permanently scar my stomach. But here we are. That was what part of my New Year's resolution was to stop using my hot water bottle so much, but I've not done it. Day 2 post-workout DOMS, drive through or stretch. The way you've written that, I thought you meant like, should I go to the drive through or walk to McDonald's? You could do a bit of stretching, you could do a bit of walking. The likelihood is, honestly, if it's like the first week of a new program, maybe you add in another rest day or something. If you have long-term DOMs, like you're doing a resistance training program, and let's say you're 3 or 4 weeks in and you're still getting really bad DOMs, and it's not because you've massively increased the weight or you're doing lots of reps, actually, I would consider that maybe your recovery isn't as good as it could be. That if you just change your program, it's completely expected. But if it's like long term, it's potentially that you're not recovering that well. So I would have a look at that. Don't scar. Yeah, no, I know the scar will go away, but like it's like been semi-permanent now. There is an app I think I called Balance. Yes, you're right, where you can track your symptoms like night sweats, aching joints, etc., and then you can take it to the doctors if you want to discuss HRT. Great point and brilliant tip. Thank you for sharing. Um, it's crazy, right? Especially when it's painful. My sister gets that with her hot water bottle. Yeah. Hi Emma, can you cover briefly the gut microbiome? What foods help with this, or do supplements help? Thanks. Great question. So I was actually just on a very good friend's podcast, which came out today, interestingly. Sorry, but that's mad. Um, and he runs a company that basically, I don't know what other way to say this, but it basically like purifies your poo and then turns it into a capsule that is meant to then help your gut microbiome. So he's very interested in gut microbiome. So most of the stuff I know about gut microbiome is from him. However, like the best evidence that we have at the moment to improve your gut microbiome is to eat as many different plant-based foods as possible. So like the aim is 30 different plant-based foods. And a lot of people think, wow, I didn't even know 30 fruit and veg. And that's because like fruit and veg is one of plant-based foods or two of plant-based food groups. But other things like spices, like even popcorn, what else? Like nuts, seeds, like all these things are plant-based foods as well. And it's the variety that matters. And it's very easy to get stuck eating the same foods because like, oh, I'll just buy loads of this because I like it. And then you end up having the same meals again and again. That's probably not beneficial to your gut microbiome because you want the variety. Other things that are really beneficial are fermented foods. So things like, no, I can never say this right, but sauerkraut, something like that. Kefir, again, can't say that. There's one other. But anyway, fermented foods, very good for your gut microbiome as well. Supplements, I wouldn't suggest quite so much. It's far better to get it from food. Do I have any thoughts on Simprove? I think it's wildly expensive and has barely any evidence. And I think the point is, and we probably don't know enough about gut microbiome yet, but there are many different, now I can't think of the word. Uh, Basically, we don't know which strains of a certain word that I can't think of that are important. So with Simprove, it's like, well, why have you picked the ones that you've picked? And how do we know that that's actually getting into the gut? And like I said, very expensive. A far better way to improve your gut microbiome is to try and get a diverse variety of plant-based foods. That would be my number one tip. And avoid too many things like processed foods and sweeteners. Any tips for sugar cravings, please, and bloated stomach? My tip for kind of all craving, kimchi. Yes, well done. Great one. Oh, okay, here's one. Kerry, sugar cravings. Have a slurp of Pepsi Max. It helps. I have a couple of tins a week when I really need it. Good. And I like the context of that. So not just like, just constantly drink Pepsi Max. Not a great idea. But like a couple of tins a week? Yeah. When you really need it? Yeah. I mean, probably a good thing. Well, maybe not a good thing, but like probably a fine thing. Um, Other things to consider with sugar cravings, a lot of people just crave things when they're not eating enough in general. So a really good way to think about this, or a really good kind of, I don't really like the term rule, but for want of a better term, like rule to have for yourself is whatever you're craving, have it after your meal instead of like when you're most hungry, when you're most likely to overeat things. So if you're craving a bit of chocolate, instead of having it now, be like, I'm going to cook myself a nice healthy, nutritious dinner with a full variety of fruit and veg to feed my gut microbiome. I might even put some kimchi. I'm not actually 100% sure what kimchi is, and I feel like I should know that, so I'm going to Google it right now. Kimchi. Okay. It's that thing that comes in a jar. Yeah. Right. Well, you could have all of that kind of stuff, right? And then be like, and now I'm going to have a piece of chocolate and enjoy it, or a couple of pieces of chocolate and enjoy it, as opposed to eating the thing that you crave when you're very hungry for it. I think that's what my problem is, not eating enough. Yeah, often that is the problem. So focus on like, okay, what do I want the core of my diet to look like? It should be built around whole foods, plant-based foods, variety, enough protein in there. And then, oh great, I'll also have a little bit of what I fancy on top of that. That's the best way to think about that. And often this happens when people become a little bit too obsessed with the calories and less about like the foods that they're eating. And if you think of like packing your diet full of foods that you want to include because you know it's going to make you feel good, as opposed to how little can I eat to try and lose weight. It's a much more inclusive mindset, a much better mindset around it. It turns it from like restriction to inclusivity, of like, I'm fueling my body because I deserve to feel great and my body deserves to be nourished in the best possible way, versus I'm going to try and restrict my food to lose weight, which never feels fun, right? But in either of those situations, you will probably create a deficit and then lose weight. Have you heard of Zoe? Yes, I have. I think you have to do blood tests to tailor your diet based on your results. Tim Spector is the partner. What are your thoughts? Thanks, Debs. There isn't enough evidence at the moment to prove that you would need to specify your diet in relation to your glycemic response to food, which, by the way, will change massively depending on the foods that you're eating. So, what I do think is really interesting is Tim Spector's research around how different people respond to the same food. So, I might find that, I don't know, a white bread massively spikes my glucose levels, and someone else might find it doesn't have that much effect on theirs. That's really interesting. Now, to take that leap from there to that means I shouldn't eat white bread, or that means this person should eat white bread, is a bit of a leap, especially if you're not diabetic. Secondly, most people don't eat any food in isolation. Like, I don't know the last time I just ate a slice of bread on its own. Thus, it's always going to be a combination of things, right? And we know that having fat and protein slows gastric emptying, which is going to slow your glucose response to that food. mean, the only thing that you might eat in isolation is like certain types of fruit, right? You might be like, I'll have a banana or an apple. But normally outside of that, you eat food in the context of other foods, often fats, which again slow this gastric emptying and then release an glucose response to that. So I think it's kind of overcomplicating things for people. And actually, what's way more important is figuring out what works for you and how you can most easily eat the foods you enjoy while creating a deficit. And now I have a notification that's not going away. And sometimes when I click this, it ruins everything. Oh, okay. I think I did it. Great. Whew. Okay. Right. Okay. So kimchi is Korean fermented cabbage and veg. Oh, that actually sounds delightful. Is it quite spicy? I guess you can get it with spices. Okay. What's best for burning calories? A 1 hour walk or a 1 hour cycle? So, technically, the answer to this is in isolation, if everything else stayed the same, whatever burns more calories during that time, right? So, if you can burn more calories cycling than you do walking, then the hour on the bike is going to have a bigger impact on fat loss. However, that's thinking that everything occurs in isolation and doesn't have knock-on effects. So sometimes if you do an hour cycle at a higher intensity than walking, that would mean that your hunger levels might ramp up. Again, not for everyone. Everyone is completely different in the way that they respond to exercise in terms of how that impacts their hunger. But arguably, you could be like, all right, well, you burn more calories cycling for an hour or going to a spin class for an hour. But if then that ramps up your hunger and then you eat more, then that's actually worse for fat loss, right? So you might burn more calories at the time, but it might have that negative response for you. Other people might find that doesn't happen for them. And other people might find that, hey, actually, a lower intensity exercise like walking might benefit me more, or maybe you just enjoy it more, which means you're more likely to stick to it. So in answer to the question, whatever burns more calories in isolation, but you have to think about the knock-on effect of things and how that's going to fit into your life as well. Um, on your program, do you advise how heavy weights to use? No. I advise a rep range, and then I advise you to lift as heavy as possible within the given rep range, because there is no way that I can possibly tell over the internet or even like in person with clients before I've actually worked with them, how much you can lift. Like nobody can tell that apart from you. And then it will always change because you'll always be getting stronger because my program is freaking awesome and you'll be increasing your strength. So it's you that picks the weights. And the first week when you do the first sessions, you'll probably be using some of that time to figure out, okay, what can I bench press for 10 reps or what can I squat for about 10 reps? And it's like a little bit of trial and error, but nobody can tell you that apart from you testing it. So no, I don't. Um, okay, sorry if I just waved at someone. Do you work through DOMS if sore 2 days later or rest until it hurts no more? It's so interesting. Okay, well, I know actually, I was like, so interesting how many questions about DOMS we're getting. Well, I know why. People had time off over Christmas or they're just starting in the gym, they haven't been for a while. That's why you're getting DOMS. If it's sore after 2 days, I mean, it's kind of up to you. Like, it depends how bad the DOMS are. I'll often just train through DOMS if it's like a new workout. But if it's really, really sore, then I might suggest not doing that. And if it's impacting your range of motion, again, you might decide not to train through that and have an extra rest day in between. Um, does anyone have any tips for getting steps up on days you've been quite sedentary without heading out for a walk in the dark and cold? Sometimes steps feel impossible. Okay, so I always get this question. Yeah, my fingers look better. Thanks, guys. Thanks. Um, I can barely move my arms, armpits are in bits. Yeah, okay, well, I would maybe have an extra rest day in that case. And read the steps. This comes up all the time, and people love, I think he's called Ricky, Steps with Ricky or something on YouTube. That's a good shout. I often do star jumps before I cook my dinner if I've not hit my steps, 'cause that is how cool slash annoying I am. Marching on the spot, I guess, or getting like a walking pad. You can get really relatively cheap treadmills anyway. Um Oh, I just got a very interesting message. Oh, okay. Should menopausal women supplement with calcium, or is moderate dietary dairy enough? I wouldn't supplement with calcium unless you had been told to, because actually too much calcium isn't a good thing. Um, can I do anything against the fat redistribution, I think, is that menopause? Um, You can, as in diet and exercise, and you can, as in speaking to your doctor about HRT if that's appropriate for you. It's not appropriate for everyone, but most women can and do very well on HRT. And obviously, that would replace the estrogen drop, which means that the body fat redistribution would also redistribute to an extent, at least. You suggested creatine helps mood and building muscle. Is there negative effects to taking it? No, for the vast majority of people, no. Some people experience a little bit of gastrointestinal distress, but it's actually very rare, and most people don't. And if you do, then I would just lower the dose a little bit, or at least split the dose over the day. Um, okay. Why is being menopausal Well, I guess why does being menopausal make it harder to lose weight, or is that not true? So the reason it's harder to lose weight is because of the symptoms. And like even if we just take one or two, I'm not going to go through all of them, but like one of the biggest symptoms of menopause is well, actually, even if you look at like poor sleep has a huge impact on things like your hunger, your motivation, your drive to exercise, your drive to move, like how hard it is. Obviously, if you're hungry, how hard it is to stick to your diet. That's how menopause would affect your weight. So, is it harder? Hell yeah. Like, if you're not sleeping as well, then yes, literally everything is harder. And we know there's that direct impact on hunger as well. Then we know it can also impact your mood. Is it harder to do things when you feel pretty low and depressed? Yes, it absolutely is. So your motivation would be lower. And there are tons of symptoms of menopause because unfortunately we have, or fortunately, unfortunately, whatever, we have estrogen receptors all over our body, which means that the drop in estrogen can affect places all over our body, right? So it is absolutely harder, but it's not harder for the reasons that a lot of people think it is. And it's certainly not inevitable. Like we get incredible results with menopausal women and it doesn't mean that you can't lose fat or that you will definitely put on weight. That's just yeah, that's not true. It's the symptoms that make it harder, and that's why you treat everyone as an individual because it depends on the symptoms that they're experiencing. Hi Emma, what should be a good split between cardio and weights? I'm 49 and my split is 20 minutes of cardio and 40 to 30 minutes of weights. That sounds perfect. Um, Jill, has protein been known to give you wind? Have upped the game with protein. I'm full of wind, sorry. Yeah, it has. And I think I would probably just lower it a little bit and then slowly increase it. Sometimes it's the big change. Um, any specific recommendations for menopausal women post breast cancer? Again, this depends because some women post breast cancer still can take HRT, some women can't. It would probably depend on the type of breast cancer and the treatments that you've had. Potentially, there might not be a difference. But if you're not taking HRT, then everything becomes, again, even more important because you don't have the same protective effect on things like your bone mineral density or your muscle mass, which means that actually diet and exercise, again, is even more important. But it's possibly harder to do as well because you may experience more symptoms if you're not well, you almost definitely will experience more symptoms if you're not replacing the drop in estrogen with HRT. So it does become harder um, for most people. Again, some people don't find they have that many symptoms, which is great. Um, mm, oh, we've done this. To increase metabolism 5 times 30 min runs or 1 to 2 times 1 hour sessions per week. Um, I don't know exactly what you mean by increased metabolism because you won't do that with either of those. So I guess it's more to do with your preference. I prefer the shorter, sharper exposure. Like even if you think about the impact that exercise has on your body, and that like you may have like I guess a slightly heightened metabolism that day, not really to the extent that most people think. Like, there used to be this big thing around HIIT. You're like, well, if you do HIIT training, then your metabolism's heightened for the whole day after, and you're just burning fat for the more fat for the whole day after. That's not really what happens. Actually, with HIIT training, because some of it is anaerobic, i.e., without oxygen because of the intensity of it, you have to repay that oxygen debt after you finish exercise. So you do burn slightly more calories after you finish exercise, but still likely way less than if you just did a slightly lower intensity that you could actually maintain for a longer period of time. So that was a bit of a myth around HIIT that got it really popular. In terms of the effects of long-term effects on metabolism of those different running, like 5 times a week versus 1 to 2, 1 hour, I would prefer to split it up, not really for the metabolism side. Yeah, Dr. Louise Newson is an awesome resource if you are going through the menopause and looking for some information. Right, I'm gonna try and figure out if we're actually doing this. I'm just gonna have to play this out loud.
Guys, I'm well on my way back, so actually I should be back by 6 anyway. So let's do it. I did also get a thing saying that my Ocado driver was running late, which is actually mildly convenient because I haven't been home. So I might get interrupted by a doorbell during the podcast, but other than that, I'm good to go.
Oh, great. Okay, so now I'm going to do the Fitness Unfiltered podcast. So thanks for the excellent questions. I will get back to everyone that asked a question on menopause, because I only got through about 3 of those. I got slightly sidetracked. But I will get back to those individually or on my story, and I will come back tomorrow. Or maybe I'll just answer them tomorrow. Yeah, I'll just answer them tomorrow. Right, I'll see you tomorrow. Goodbye.